Hi guys, this is Sean from Centric Wealth Advisory. It's been a while since I've uploaded a tutorial video. I've been currently studying towards the CFA exams, and that's been quite time consuming over the last few months due to the volume. However, I've decided to create a template for those who'd like to learn more about the calculation for retirement without factoring in current provisions and all the other spreadsheets and things that are made available. This template has been created with the goal to help show the illustration of how much capital you need firstly and how the capital depletes using discretionary and non-discretionary funds. So I'm going to just do a share screen to show you what I mean. So this template has been created for those wanting to just play around with certain scenarios. Just go back over here just so I can explain this over here. Link to our website, link to our LinkedIn page, more information about the FBI approved practices. Centric Wealth Advisory is an FBI approved practice, and these are some of the awards that we have won over the last few years in the Crutham Integradex Awards, which is every year. It's awarded for top wealth managers, People's Choice. We've won that in the last 4 years. And Janae Scott, my colleague, won the Wealth Manager of the Year 2023. So we do have quite a good reputation when it comes to lifestyle planning for clients. And I, on the side, just make templates for educational purposes for those who would like to learn more about financial planning or are students studying towards their CFP designation and would like to get more practical experience using templates such as this. So the first thing I want to show you here is the goal. Let's just move this over here. The goal here is to first put in all the details. I've removed the actual life expectancy tables that you would typically find um, on the original template that I released. So you can choose between male and female. You put your date of birth in here. This is the format. Current age will be calculated automatically. And you put in this case, age 70 is the date of retirement. This person would like to work 5 years longer than the norm. This person would like to receive 93,000 Rand in today's terms, which is 1.116 annually. We'd like to increase this at 5% per year, 10% growth, inflation 5%. You'd like this capital to last 25 years, which means you'll be 95 when the money has depleted. I'm going to remove this for now. So there's upfront ongoing advisory. In most cases, you would negotiate an ongoing advisory fee based on the number of the total value of the assets. And now we do the calculation. So 1.116 million, which is the annual amount of 93, has to be adjusted by 16 years by inflation. Okay, so 16 years is dated between 54 and 70. 5% is the CPI rate. So if we make it 6%, it'll adjust it accordingly. So that amount is 2.436 million Rand is what the income is going to be in 16 years. So that's the starting point. Now we need to work out what is the 2.436 million applying the income that it requires for 25 years. Now we've said that it's going to escalate at 5% and grow at 10. So we need to calculate what they call the resultant rate. This is what financial planning students are required to do in the exam. And this is how you would practically do it if you were doing the calculation, let's say online or on software, whatever. You would need to have the resultant rate. You can't just say 10 minus 5. So the resultant rate in this case is 4.7619%. So it's genuinely 4 decimals, which means that this amount lasting 25 years using the resultant rate, which is the difference between the escalation of 5% in retirement and the growth of 10% before fees, this person would need to have 36.843 million Rand at the age of 70 to last 25 years. If we take this off and say we don't want to escalate the capital, then the the lump sum requirement would drop because we're not factoring in the escalation. So it's just purely 10% growth on my capital. Now, obviously, if you have the cost of living increasing annually, I'm referring to medical aids, groceries, etc., it would not be advisable to have no escalation on your income in retirement, which is why we have this provision for you. Now, you can change any assumption over here. It's entirely up to you. That's why it is for educational purposes. When you actually formulate a strategy with your financial planner, you would factor in these things and then monitor it on an ongoing basis. Now, that's the starting point. Now you've got 36.843 million Rand is what we need. Now, if this client only had discretionary money, in other words, they had no retirement annuity, pension fund, provident fund, preservation fund that they would draw from, retire from at the age of 70, and they purely had, let's say, unit trust, endowment, tax-free savings, share portfolio, etc., then there's no restriction in the drawdown. Now, in the financial planning qualification, you would assume it's discretionary money because the calculator has to make the money last 25 years, and this is the math behind it. So this is exactly 25 years. If I go and change any assumption over here, let's say I need to make it 75, then it's going to change it to, 25 years. And before we said it was, I changed the wrong one. Apologies. Let's make this 30. So now it'll last 30 years. So whatever amount you put in there for the money to last, so the number of years until capital depletion, that will change the drawdown as you change it automatically. Just going to put it back on 25. So we can now see on a model how this cash flow would actually be extrapolated when you do the calculation. So now you're saying, well, how do I know it's 36.43 million? How do I know that? If you factor in the 10% growth before fees and the 5% escalation, it'll automatically do the calculation for you. If I go and change this back to naught, as I showed you before, then there's no escalation, as I've shown you, as I've mentioned, and the capital required is now dropped to 24 million Rand. It'll still only last 25 years, but you've not factoring the escalation, so now the capital required is going to drop to 24 million. If you made it 4%, sorry, exact same scenario, it's still going to last 25 years, but the starting capital will be adjusted. So the point of getting at is the starting capital will determine how long your capital is going to last if you understand what income you want in today's terms, then adjusted by inflation, if you want to have escalations on that, and a target return. So that's very important to note because 9 out of 10 South Africans will not understand that and run out of money before the 25 years has been reached. In other words, this investor might have 24 million Rand, but he wants to escalate it at 5%. It's not going to last 25 years, simply put. And for that reason, they introduced the restrictions for non-discretionary or retirement funds with the Pensions Fund Act, which states that if you draw money from a living annuity, you are restricted between 2.5% and 17.5% drawdown on an annual basis. So we apply exactly the same scenario as before, but now we're capping it where this reached 17.5% over here when he was 89 years of age. The same thing's going to happen. The difference is it's going to cap at 17.5%, which means the money will last longer than 25 years. But the problem is that it'll actually reduce in real terms. In other words, the money won't escalate at the 5%, it'll actually reduce because it's capping at 17.5. And therefore, the graph will show you the money lasts well past this client's 100th birthday. But in real terms, in terms of the actual income that they're going to receive for tax, it's going to reduce compared to that. And that's why it's important to have a diverse portfolio where you've got a combination of discretionary and non-discretionary funds so that you can draw more from one and less from the other, and then blend it to try and make the capital last as long as possible. So this is to show you now the differences between discretionary and non-discretionary funds when you draw it from the date of retirement. As I said before, discretionary will always last as how long as you want it to last based on your goal. If you change this to 15, it'll only last 15. And that's how you can show anyone who wants to understand how this calculation actually is done practically. And with compulsory funds, unfortunately, you cannot calculate the exact number of years. This actually has a longer table. I've just capped it to 105 in this case, but if you extrapolate this graph out, it'll go over 110, 120 years because it's capped that amount. It's every year it's going to reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce. But the reality is the client will most likely have passed away. So that money will be passed on to a beneficiary they've nominated on the living annuity. So let's just go back to the goals here and let's put in a 1% to say 1% up front. The 1% up front will be added onto the lump sum requirements. The reason why I've just done that is because it boosts the capital at retirement. Minusing the 1% gives you the value you originally had. We've just minused it off. So we've taken the capital less than 1% so that it lasts 25 years again. This just helps an investor know what capital they need to have to factor in the 1%. But the reason why I've just done that is because this is not a compulsory amount. This is generally discussed between the advisor and the client. The advisor might take 0.5%, and including that, it's 0.58. I don't know what it's doing. It's accidentally saved it there. It's just going to active 0.5%. So now we can actually deduct the 0.58% off, and we can then see here how the fees impact the depletion. So in this case, 0.58%, difference of 2 years, it is rounded off. I would say that's fairly good because the advisor's job is to monitor this investment on an annual basis to ensure that that 10% return before fees is met. In other words, if you're not getting your 10% and there's a fee involved, then we need to see what asset class mix you have, because that's going to determine, as we can see here, the depletion rate, which in this case is 23 years with that 0.58% fee included. Now, I do understand the other fees such as platform, administration, or the TIC, etc. That I do understand that can be modeled. You can factor it into return if you really want to. In other words, we say we're looking at CPI, that 10% could factor in those fees, and then you just have the advisory fee, because the advisory fee is the one you're going to be referring to when you are having meetings, reviews with your financial planner, because the financial planner is the person you're going to have the relationship with, not the asset manager. In other words, Alan Gray is not going to be having conversations about your portfolio. They're going to be administrating your investment, having the funds on their platform which you would have invested in. It could be their funds, it could be other funds. The point is that the relationship will be held with the advisor. And having an annual review with a professional obviously increases your chances of getting to that 36.84 million rand without having to do it on your own and making potential mistakes with regards to tax and all the rest, especially estate planning. So this is a nice way to illustrate the differences between discretionary and non-discretionary, but also more importantly, to help you better understand the capital requirements. Now, the reason why this is also important is because if you reach the 17.5% sooner, in other words, let's say we escalate this at 8%, okay? And now you reach the 17.5% sooner, right? you might have to factor in more capital at retirement simply because you might want to not have your capital deplete before you turn 95 or run out of capital at that stage. In other words, okay, in this case, it has to increase a lot more than that. Let's just make it 10. See what happens. It's still the same. You'd have to play around with the various amount of scenarios to see what I mean. But the point I'm making is that when you get into 17.5% and the client is now 89, they might want to have an escalation on that income. But in reality, they probably will drop it below the 5% because their living expenses would purely be medical aid. It might be frail care. So their living income might drop simply because they're not able to travel, they're not able to do whatever goals they had, which was factored into the lifestyle planning even before they retired. All those things might change. But the whole point of this exercise is to just get a better understanding around retirement planning so that you can make informed decisions when you are speaking to a financial planner, when you are planning for a future date in which you are planning to stop working and planning to receive an income from your sources of income that you sources of capital that you're going to be deriving it from. Anyway, if there's any questions you might have, welcome to drop them in the comment section of this video. Otherwise, I shall hopefully try and make some additional videos similar to this that you can use. But hopefully this will give some clarity for those who are just wanting to better understand the retirement calculations that are required, because there's a lot of calculations that you can use as rules of thumb. Talking about saving 15% to replace 75%, that's all relative to when you start and also whether there's going to be escalation on your funds at retirement, which in this case there is. So this calculator is a bit more accurate in my opinion, but again, for educational purposes, always speak to a financial planner when you are doing retirement planning in general. Bye for now, and I hope to create another template for you in the near future. Thanks very much. Ciao.